A Navy SEAL came home to an empty winter ranch, hoping the snow would quiet his grief. But on the road to Silver Elk, his German shepherd suddenly woke and warned him to stop. Below the curve, a patrol car lay overturned in the ditch, half buried in white silence. Inside was a wounded deputy who whispered only one thing: "Don't take me to the clinic." That warning would lead Caleb, Bishop, and Mara into a truth hidden beneath kindness, debt, and fear. And before the truth came into the light, Caleb would discover that his own family land had become a hidden passage for a web of fraud after his father died. Tell us where you're watching from. Leave your thoughts after the story, and please like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers so we can keep bringing you more heartfelt stories. The road to Silver Elk Ranch did not welcome Caleb Rourke home. It received him in silence. Snow came down over Sawtooth Valley in wide, bright sheets, soft enough to look harmless from a distance, heavy enough to make the old mountain road disappear beneath the tires of his pickup. Pine trees stood on either side like tall, watchful priests, their branches bent beneath white robes. Beyond them, the Idaho mountains rose in pale blue layers, half hidden by cloud, as if the world had been erased and redrawn in charcoal and frost. Caleb drove with both hands on the wheel. He was 51 years old, though there were mornings when his knees argued for 60, and his eyes accused him of being older still. He stood 6 feet tall, broad through the shoulders, hard in the way of men who had spent their lives carrying weight without asking whether anyone noticed. His hair was cut in a neat undercut, dark brown with silver gathering at the temples. His face was clean-shaven, angular, American in that old carved-from-weather way. Strong chin, straight nose, eyes that did not waste motion. Those eyes had seen too many doors kicked open, too many roads that did not lead back. Today they watched snow cover the road to the only place left with his name on it. Silver Elk Ranch waited somewhere ahead, tucked beneath the northern ridge. His father had built half the fencing by hand. His mother had planted the blue spruce near the porch. His younger sister had once painted a crooked wooden sign for the gate, laughing because the elk looked more like a confused horse wearing a crown. They were all gone now. The ranch remained. That was the cruel comedy of wood and stone. People left, houses remembered. Beside him, Bishop slept in the passenger seat with the solemn dignity of an old soldier pretending not to snore. The German shepherd was 8, large and deep-chested, with a black saddle across his back and warm gold along his legs and chest. His muzzle had begun to silver at the edges, and a small tear marked the left ear, a remnant from another country and another kind of winter. Caleb glanced at him and felt something in his chest ease. "Don't look so comfortable," he muttered. "You're helping unload." Bishop opened one amber-brown eye, judged the statement unworthy of response, and closed it again. For a moment, Caleb almost smiled. Almost was a country he knew well. He had come back to Silver Elk because the Navy had given him leave and because the lawyer had stopped using gentle language in emails. The property needed decisions. Taxes needed paying. Roof boards needed replacing. A gate needed rehanging before spring runoff turned the lower pasture into a swamp. But beneath all that was a quieter reason, one Caleb did not say out loud. He wanted to know if a man could return to the place that made him without being swallowed by the ghosts that stayed behind. The dashboard clock glowed 4:17 p.m. Afternoon light was already thinning. Winter in the valley did not fall into evening. It surrendered all at once. Caleb leaned forward slightly as the road curved toward Raven Cut, a narrow bend where plows always arrived late and shadows arrived early. Bishop woke before the curve, not gradually. 1 second he was resting. The next, he snapped upright, paws braced against the floorboard, body rigid. Caleb felt the shift before he understood it. "What is it?" Bishop's nose lifted. His ears came forward. A low sound formed in his chest, not quite a growl, not yet a warning. Then he struck Caleb's right forearm with one paw, hard enough to jolt his grip on the wheel. "Easy." Bishop struck again, sharper this time, and stared toward the passenger side window. Caleb slowed. The truck rolled forward through the falling snow. At first, he saw nothing but the white blur of the roadside ditch, the black ribs of bare brush, the silver gleam of ice under powder. The valley seemed empty in that perfect winter way that could make a man believe God had paused the whole world to listen. Then Bishop barked. Once, sharp, final. Caleb's foot moved to the brake. The pickup slid a few feet before the tires caught. He lowered the window halfway. Cold air flooded the cab, carrying pine, snow, and something else. Oil, hot metal, a faint chemical bite that did not belong to the mountain. Bishop pushed his head toward the opening and barked again, this time at the ditch below the curve. Caleb saw it then, a dark shape half buried in the snow. Not a fallen branch, not an abandoned trailer. A patrol car. It lay tipped awkwardly in the shallow ditch, nose angled down, rear wheels raised just enough that one tire still turned in slow, helpless circles. Snow had already begun to soften the hard edges of the wreck, dusting the roof, the shattered glass, the county emblem on the side door. Caleb killed the engine. For half a second, he did not move. There was a strange thing that happened when the world changed too fast. The body arrived before the heart did. His hands unfastened the seatbelt. His eyes scanned the road. His mind measured angles, tire marks, visibility, threat. The old training rose in him without permission, clean and cold. Then the heart caught up. "Bishop, stay close." The dog was out as soon as Caleb opened the door. Snow swallowed the sound of Caleb's boots as he moved down the embankment. The ditch was not deep, but the slope was slick. He slid the last few feet and caught himself against the side of the overturned vehicle. "County Sheriff," he murmured, reading the markings through frost. The driver's window was spiderwebbed, but still mostly intact. The windshield had cracked open near the lower corner. Inside, a woman hung sideways against her seatbelt, one shoulder pressed hard into the door, dark hair fallen across her face. The airbag had deployed and deflated against the steering wheel. Her left hand was trapped at an awkward angle near the console, fingers slack. Caleb crouched. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" No answer. He pressed two fingers against the side of her throat through the broken window gap. Careful, steady. Pulse, weak, but there. "Good," he whispered. "Good. Stay with me." Bishop stood above them on the edge of the ditch, not pacing, not whining. His body faced the road. His nose worked the air. Once he turned his head toward the bend behind them and released a low rumble that tightened the skin between Caleb's shoulders. Caleb looked back. There were tire marks near the curve. 2 sets. One belonged to the patrol car. The other crossed hard from the side road, cut too cleanly into the snow, then vanished beneath fresh powder. A bad road could flip a car. But roads did not choose impact points. Caleb pulled the emergency tool from his truck and returned to the driver's side. The cold made every sound sharper, metal complaining, glass ticking, Bishop's breath, his own pulse in his ears. He broke the weakened corner of the window, cleared the glass with his sleeve, then reached in to support the woman's weight before cutting the belt. She dropped only an inch into his arm. Light, but not frail. A working body, a disciplined body. Someone used to standing her ground. Her jacket had a sawtooth county patch on the sleeve. Her badge was still clipped at her belt, scuffed but present. Deputy Mara Ellison. Caleb eased her out through the window opening, careful of her neck and shoulder, then carried her up the slope to the passenger side of his truck. Bishop descended with them, his body close to Caleb's leg, still watching the road between glances at the woman. Mara's face was pale beneath the windburn. She had a small cut at her hairline, a bruise forming along one cheekbone, and scratches across her wrist where broken glass had kissed the skin. Her breathing remained even. Caleb checked her pupils with a penlight from his kit, then wrapped a blanket around her. "Deputy Ellison," he said firmly. "Mara, open your eyes if you can hear me." Her eyelids fluttered. For a moment, her eyes opened, gray-blue, unfocused, full of pain and immediate fear, not confusion. Fear? That told him more than he wanted to know. "You were in a crash," Caleb said. "I'm going to get you help." Her hand moved suddenly, gripping his sleeve with surprising strength. "No." Her voice was barely more than torn breath. Caleb leaned closer. "You need medical attention." Her fingers tightened. "Not Evergreen." The name came out like a warning nailed to a door. Caleb went still. Evergreen Rural Clinic was the closest medical station in the valley. Maybe 15 minutes in fair weather. Twice that in snow. He had passed its sign on the way in. Green letters, white cross, a smiling promise painted for people who needed to believe promises. Mara forced her eyes open again. "Please," she whispered. "Don't take me there." The word "please" did not sound weak. It sounded expensive, as if it cost her pride, training, and whatever remained of her strength. Caleb looked toward the road. Snow was thickening. No headlights, no movement, no signal bars on his phone when he checked. The valley had folded them into one of its white pockets, and whatever had happened at Ravencut was being quietly buried by the weather. Bishop stepped closer to Mara. He sniffed the torn sleeve of her jacket, then the blanket, then lifted his head toward the wrecked cruiser, his ears pinned forward. A low growl moved through him again, softer this time, but certain. Caleb knew that sound. Bishop was not reacting to injury. He was reacting to a trail. Caleb looked back at the patrol car, at the clean angle of the tire marks, at the way the other vehicle had come from the side road, struck, and disappeared. At the woman in his truck, a deputy asking not for comfort, not for pain medicine, not for a hospital, but for distance from the one place that should have meant safety. A man could spend his whole life trying to leave war behind. Then one winter road could lift its white hand and point. Caleb closed the passenger door gently and moved around to the driver's side. Bishop jumped into the back seat without being told, positioning himself where he could watch both Mara and the rear window. Caleb started the truck. For a moment, he sat with his hand on the gear shift, feeling the pull of two lives. One was the life he had promised himself on the drive home: fence posts, roof boards, coffee at dawn, learning whether silence could become peace. The other had blood on the sleeve of a deputy's coat and tire tracks vanishing into snowfall. He glanced at Mara. Her eyes had closed again, but her hand still gripped the edge of the blanket as if holding herself to the world. "Silver Elk is closer than the main road," he said, though she was barely conscious. "I've got a medical kit there." Bishop gave one quiet huff from the back. Caleb almost laughed, but the sound did not make it out. "Yeah," he said. "I know." He pulled away from Ravencut slowly, leaving the overturned patrol car behind in the ditch, its red and blue light bar dark beneath the falling snow. The truck climbed toward the ranch, headlights tunneling through the white. Ahead, Silver Elk waited with its empty rooms, its cold hearth, its memories sealed behind timber and dust. Caleb had thought he was returning to a house of ghosts. But as the storm closed around the road and Bishop watched the darkness through the rear window, he understood something with the old, unwelcome clarity of a man who had survived too much to ignore instinct. Some ghosts were already there. Others were following. And by the time the porch light of Silver Elk Ranch appeared through the trees, faint and amber against the snow, Caleb Rourke knew the valley had not brought him home to rest. It had brought him home to choose. Silver Elk Ranch did not wake gently. It groaned. Old timber shifted under the weight of snow. Wind pressed itself against the windows as if searching for a crack wide enough to enter. Somewhere above the kitchen, a loose board tapped once, paused, then tapped again with the patience of a small, stubborn ghost. Caleb carried Deputy Mara Ellison through the front door just after dusk. The house smelled of cold wood, old leather, and the faint cedar oil his mother used to rub into the staircase railing. The hearth had been dark when he arrived, but he had stacked kindling there before leaving the previous month, more out of habit than hope. Now he lowered Mara onto the long leather couch near the fireplace, then moved with a quiet urgency that belonged less to panic than to training. Bishop came in last. The German shepherd shook snow from his coat, then planted himself between the door and the room, ears forward, amber eyes fixed on the storm-dark glass. He did not whine. He did not crowd Caleb. He simply chose his post, as if the ranch had become a perimeter, and everyone inside it now belonged to him. "Good boy," Caleb said, without looking up. Mara stirred, but did not wake. Caleb cut away the torn cuff of her sleeve, careful not to move her wrist too sharply. Her pulse was stronger now, still uneven, but there. The cut at her hairline had bled enough to look worse than it was. Her shoulder would bruise deep by morning. Her ribs worried him more, but when he checked her breathing, there was no sharp collapse, no sign that the injury had turned inward and cruel. "Lucky?" he murmured. The word felt wrong the moment it left his mouth. A woman who begged not to be taken to the nearest clinic was not lucky. She was alive. There was a difference. He opened the old military medical kit from the hall closet. It was not something he displayed. It sat behind coats, winter boots, a cardboard box of Christmas ornaments no one had touched in years. His father's wool jacket still hung there, broad and empty. His mother's blue scarf rested on the upper shelf, folded as if she might return from town and put it on before supper. Caleb kept his eyes on the kit. Gauze, antiseptic, sterile strips, penlight, elastic wrap, thermal blanket, pain medication, enough to handle a bad night. Not enough to explain one. He cleaned the cut at Mara's forehead first. She flinched, eyelids tightening. Her hand moved, searching for something at her belt. Caleb caught her wrist gently before her fingers reached the holster. "Easy," he said. "You're safe for the next 5 minutes. We'll negotiate the rest after that." Her eyes opened to narrow slits, gray-blue, sharp even through the fog of pain. She tried to focus on him, then past him, then the room, fireplace, front door, windows, kitchen entry, back hallway. Caleb saw the count happen. A trained person looked for exits before comfort. He knew that habit. It was not suspicion alone. It was a scar with discipline wrapped around it. "Where am I?" she asked, voice rough. "Silver Elk Ranch?" Her gaze returned to him. "You're Rourke." "Caleb? Former Navy? Still have the bad haircut?" For half a breath, something almost amused moved across her face. It vanished quickly, swallowed by pain. "You pulled me out. Bishop found you." At the sound of his name, Bishop glanced back from the door. Mara's eyes shifted to the dog, and her breathing changed. Not relaxed, not yet, but steadier. "He yours?" "Most days. Some days he lets me believe that." Bishop came closer, slow enough not to startle her. He lowered his head near the edge of the couch, sniffed once, then stepped back. His nose lingered at the sleeve of her uniform jacket, which Caleb had folded over a chair. Mara saw it. Her body tensed. Caleb noticed, but did not ask. He took the penlight and checked her pupils again. "Any nausea?" "A little." "Double vision?" "No." "Do you remember the crash?" Her jaw tightened. "Enough. That's not a medical answer. It's the only one I'm giving right now." Caleb sat back on his heels. There it was, the line. He respected lines. People who had survived long enough to draw them usually had reasons. "You took a hit to the head," he said. "You need observation. If you throw up, lose time, or can't stay awake when I ask you to, we're going to have a different conversation." "I'm not going to Evergreen." "You said that already." "I need you to understand it." The wind struck the house hard enough to make the fire shiver. Caleb looked toward the window. Snow erased the yard beyond the glass. The porch light threw a cone of amber over the steps, but beyond that the world had narrowed to moving white and black tree trunks. "No signal," he said. "I checked on the way in." "Landline?" "Old. Works when the mountain feels generous." "Don't use county dispatch." He turned back to her. Mara swallowed, and the motion pulled pain through her ribs. She hid most of it. Not all. "Not yet," she said. Caleb's expression did not change, but something inside him stepped closer to the edge. "You're a deputy telling me not to call dispatch." "I'm a deputy telling you I may not know who hears the call after it leaves this house." That answer settled between them like a blade placed carefully on a table. Bishop moved to the uniform jacket again. This time he pressed his nose against the torn fabric near the shoulder, then sneezed once, irritated. Not from blood. Blood had a language he knew well. This was something else, faint, chemical, threaded with oil and cold metal. Caleb crossed the room and lifted the jacket. Mara's hand tightened around the blanket. He stopped immediately. "I'm not searching you." "You're holding my jacket." "Because my dog thinks it smells wrong." "My whole night smells wrong." A fair answer. Caleb laid the jacket back where it had been. The small act changed the room more than he expected. Mara watched him release the fabric, watched him step away without taking anything from the pockets, without turning the badge over, without claiming authority over what was hers. Trust did not enter her face. But one lock opened. Not the door, just one lock. Caleb rose and went to the kitchen. The tap coughed before giving water. He filled a glass, returned, and helped her drink without touching her more than necessary. She noticed that too. "You always this careful?" she asked. "No." That earned another faint flicker of humor. "Honest, at least." "Efficient?" "Those aren't the same thing." "No," Caleb said. "They're not." For a while, the house held only small sounds. Fire taking to the logs, wind dragging snow along the siding. Bishop's nails clicking once as he shifted his weight by the door. Mara breathed through pain and forced herself to stay awake when Caleb asked her questions every 15 minutes. Name, date, current president, where she worked. She answered each one, though once she told him the governor owed her $20, and Caleb could not tell if that was confusion or personality. By midnight, the worst of the shock had passed. She was pale, bruised, exhausted, but oriented. Caleb wrapped her wrist, then set a folded towel beneath her shoulder to ease the pressure on her ribs. "You need a doctor," he said. "I know, but not Evergreen." "Not Evergreen?" "Then tell me enough to keep from making the wrong call." Mara stared into the fire. The orange light moved across her face, softening nothing. She looked younger in pain and older in silence. Somewhere beneath the torn uniform and bruised skin was a woman used to being doubted and tired of proving she could stand. "I was following a transport vehicle," she said at last. "White van, medical plates. It left Evergreen after hours." Caleb did not interrupt. "That road near Raven Cut," she continued, "isn't part of any approved route. I'd seen it before on fuel logs, but never on clinic dispatch sheets." "You were alone?" "I wasn't supposed to be working the case officially." "That's not an answer." "It's the safest one." Caleb accepted that with a slight nod. Mara looked down at her bandaged wrist. "Someone came out of the side road before the bend. No horn, no skid, just impact." "A staged accident." "I didn't say that." "You didn't need to." Her eyes rose to his. For the first time she studied him not as a possible threat, but as a man who understood the shape of violence when it wore ordinary clothes. "Evergreen Rural Clinic is protected," she said quietly. "Not officially, not on paper, but in every way that matters in a small county." Caleb took the chair across from her, leaving space between them. "Protected by who?" Mara's mouth curved without warmth. "Gratitude, debt, fear. Sometimes those wear the same coat." She hesitated. He could see her choosing what not to say. "There are treatment records that don't match patient statements," she said. "Insurance claims for services people swear they never received. Medication logs with numbers that make sense only if the medicine walked out the back door. That's federal. It becomes federal when someone can prove it without disappearing first." Caleb leaned back. The name came then, not as an accusation, but as a weight too large to keep out of the room. Gideon Vale. Caleb knew the name. Everyone in the valley knew it, even men who had been gone for years. Vale Foundation had paid for the new ambulance bay. Vale money repaired the church roof after a bad storm. Vale Winter Relief delivered heaters to ranch houses when the power grid failed. There was a sign near the town limits with his name on it, painted beneath a smiling green cross. Mara watched recognition move through Caleb's face. "He helps people," Caleb said. "Yes," she replied. "That's what makes him difficult." Outside, the storm softened for a moment, and in that hollow space, Caleb heard the old house settle around them. His father had once said that powerful men in small towns rarely needed to shout. If they had done their work well, other people lowered their voices for them. Mara closed her eyes, but not in sleep. "Deputy," Caleb said. "Mara?" "All right, Mara." He rested his forearms on his knees. "If you stay here until morning, I monitor you for concussion. At first light, you decide who you trust enough to contact. If your condition worsens, I make the medical call, whether you like it or not." "You always negotiate like a hostage commander?" "Only with stubborn law enforcement bleeding on my couch." "I'm not bleeding anymore." "Congratulations." A tired sound escaped her. It might have become a laugh in another life. Bishop chose that moment to stand, walk to the couch, and place his head lightly on the edge of Mara's blanket. She looked down at him. Slowly, as if asking permission from both dog and pain, she touched the fur between his ears. The dog did not move away. Something changed in her then. Not trust exactly, something smaller and more dangerous. Relief. Mara's fingers lingered against Bishop's head. "My mother had a shepherd mix," she said, almost to herself. "Ugliest dog in 3 counties. Bit a pastor once." Caleb raised an eyebrow. Was the pastor guilty? Of wearing too much cologne. Justified. This time she did laugh, softly, briefly. It hurt her ribs, and she winced, but the sound remained in the room after it faded. Caleb found himself looking away. Not because it was intimate, because it was human, and human things had become harder for him than dangerous ones. Near dawn, Mara slept in short, uneasy stretches. Caleb did not. He sat in the chair with a cup of black coffee cooling in his hands and watched the fire burn low. Bishop remained near the door, though every so often he rose to inspect the jacket again. Once Caleb stepped to the window and looked across the yard. The storm had thinned to fine snow. The barn was a black shape beyond the fence. The porch rail wore a white cap. The world looked peaceful in the dishonest way winter could look peaceful after covering every track. When the first gray light entered the room, Mara opened her eyes. She knew where she was this time. That mattered. "How long was I out?" she asked. "On and off through the night." "You stayed awake." "You're welcome." "I didn't say thank you." "You were getting there." She studied him with more clarity now. The sharpness had returned to her eyes, but so had a caution. Pain hadn't made her careless. Fear had not made her foolish. "I need to leave before anyone thinks to look here," she said. "You can barely stand." "I've stood through worse." That sentence is rarely followed by good judgment. Mara pushed herself upright anyway. She managed it, but the color drained from her face. Caleb stepped forward, then stopped before touching her. She noticed. Again. "Why didn't you go through my things?" she asked. "Because they're yours?" "That simple?" "No, but simple is what I'm choosing." Mara looked toward the chair where her uniform jacket hung. "Most people would want answers." "I want several." "And?" "I don't need to steal them." The quiet that followed was different from the one before, less defensive, more uncertain. Mara nodded once, as if filing something important. She gave him instructions for contacting her through a safer number, not dispatch, not her office line, but a message relay that would not draw attention unless someone already knew to watch it. She did not tell him everything. Caleb did not ask for everything. Before leaving, she stood near the door while Bishop sniffed her glove, then gently took it in his mouth. "Bishop," Caleb warned. The dog carried the glove not to his bed, not under the table, but to the spot beside Caleb's boots. He set it down with deliberate care and sat beside it, tail still, posture grave. Mara looked at the glove, then at Caleb. For the first time since the wreck, her smile was not just a reflex against pain. "When this is over," she said, "I owe you dinner." "You don't owe me anything." "I didn't say I owed you for saving me." She glanced at Bishop. "Maybe I owe him." Caleb looked down at the dog, who appeared entirely too pleased with himself. "Great," Caleb said. "An old dog just accepted a date on my behalf." Mara's laugh was careful this time, guarded against the ache in her ribs, but it warmed the cold entryway all the same. Caleb opened the door. Morning snow waited outside, bright and clean, as if the night had never happened. Mara stepped onto the porch, moving slowly but under her own power. She paused once at the top step and looked back into the house, at the fire, at Bishop, at the man who had not demanded trust before earning the right to ask for it. "Caleb," she said. He looked up. "If anyone asks, you never saw me." He held her gaze. "Then I never saw you." She nodded, pulled her coat tighter, and disappeared into the pale morning, leaving only one set of careful footprints across the porch. Bishop watched her go. Then he lowered his nose to the glove she had forgotten, on purpose or by pain, Caleb could not tell which. He sniffed once, sneezed at the same strange chemical scent, and looked up at Caleb with the grave displeasure of a judge who had just been handed poor evidence. Caleb closed the door slowly. The house settled around him again, no longer empty in the same way. On the couch, a faint smear of blood marked the blanket. On the floor, Mara's glove rested beside his boots. And somewhere beyond the white fields, a clinic with a green cross waited beneath the town's gratitude like a locked room no one wanted to open. For 3 days, Caleb Rourke tried to become an ordinary man. He started with the fence. The northern rail had sagged under the weight of old snow, and 2 posts leaned like tired veterans, pretending they did not need help standing. Caleb carried tools from the barn, cleared the packed snow with a shovel, and worked until his gloves stiffened with cold. The rhythm should have comforted him. Hammer, breath, scrape of boot, creak of wood. Honest sounds. Small sounds. The kind of sounds a man could trust. Bishop supervised from a drift near the gate. The German shepherd sat tall, ears forward, black and gold coat bright against the white field. He watched Caleb drive nails with the solemn authority of a foreman who had never once paid taxes but felt qualified to judge workmanship. "You want to help?" Caleb asked. Bishop blinked. "Exactly." The ranch seemed almost peaceful in daylight. Silver Elk did not look haunted when the sun touched it. The barn roof shone under new snow. The pasture rolled toward the pine line in smooth white waves. The porch light, still on from the night Mara had left, looked foolish in the morning brightness, like a candle refusing to admit the dawn had arrived. Caleb thought about turning it off. He did not. Inside the house, the couch had been cleaned, the blanket washed. Mara's blood was gone from the fabric, but not from memory. Her glove sat on the table near the kitchen window, sealed in a plastic bag Caleb had found in an old drawer. He told himself he kept it because it might matter as evidence. That was true. It was not the whole truth. The glove changed the house. Before, Silver Elk had been full of old absences. His father's jacket in the hall closet, his mother's scarf on the shelf, his sister's crooked elk sign by the gate. Now it held something unfinished, a question with snow still melting from its edges. Every few hours, Caleb checked the safe number Mara had given him. No message. That should have been good. Silence meant she was alive enough to stay hidden, careful enough not to reach out without cause. Still, each time the phone showed nothing, Caleb felt the old tension return between his shoulders. He did not like waiting. He liked it even less when waiting pretended to be peace. On the fourth morning, he cleaned the tack room. By noon, he had stacked hay, repaired a latch on the feed door, and found a mouse nest inside a cracked riding helmet that had once belonged to his sister. He held the helmet longer than necessary, thumb resting on the faded blue paint. For a moment, memory came not as pain, but as sound. His sister laughing in the paddock, his father shouting, "Heels down!" His mother from the porch telling everyone the soup was getting cold and the horse had better not be invited to dinner again. Caleb set the helmet back gently. Bishop appeared in the doorway, carrying Mara's glove in his mouth. Caleb stared at him. "No." Bishop padded forward and dropped the bagged glove at his feet. "No," Caleb repeated, less firmly. The dog sat. Outside, wind moved lightly across the pasture. The day was clear enough to see the northern ridge. Above it, the old trail climbed through the pines toward a high shoulder of mountain Caleb's father had called the Breathing Road. Not because it was easy, because his father used to say, when the valley closed in, the mountain gave a man room to breathe. Caleb looked from the glove to the dog. "You are a terrible influence." Bishop's tail moved once. By early afternoon, Caleb had packed water, a medical pouch, a coil of light rope, and a folded map older than some of the roads printed on it. He wore his fitted long-sleeve green camouflage layer beneath an olive winter jacket, dark cargo pants, and boots that knew the mountain better than most men knew their own kitchens. Bishop wore his olive harness with the small side pouch, looking intolerably proud of himself. They left by the back pasture and crossed toward the tree line. The snow had settled deep but clean. Each step broke through the crust with a soft crunch. The ranch fell away behind them, the house growing smaller until it looked less like a burden and more like something waiting patiently to be forgiven. The old trail began near a split cedar. Caleb paused there. His father had cut the first marker into that tree decades ago. 3 short lines and 1 long, a private sign for those who knew the land. In storms, when roads vanished and engines failed, that marker had pointed neighbors toward shelter. Men with frozen hands, women stranded after late shifts, ranchers who thought they knew better than weather and discovered weather had no sense of humor. Caleb ran his gloved fingers over the cuts. The wood had healed around them, but had not erased them. "Still here," he murmured. Bishop looked back at him, then continued up the trail. For the first mile, nothing happened. That, Caleb thought, was how trouble often began. It gave you enough ordinary to make you feel foolish for expecting otherwise. The trail narrowed as it climbed. Pine branches sagged low, brushing snow across Caleb's shoulders. Sunlight moved through the trees in fractured gold, turning patches of ice into small mirrors. Below, Sawtooth Valley opened in quiet layers, roofs tucked beneath snow, smoke rising from chimneys, the dark line of the county road, and far off, the green cross sign of Evergreen Rural Clinic. Even from that distance, Caleb could see the sign, a little symbol of safety. A little lie, perhaps. Bishop stopped. Not abruptly like he had at Ravencut. This was slower, stranger. He lowered his head, inhaled once, then turned off the trail. Bishop? The dog did not bolt. He moved with purpose, cutting between two low pines toward a shallow dip in the snow. Caleb followed, ducking under branches. Bishop reached a cluster of dwarf firs and began pawing at the ground. Snow flew. "Easy," Caleb said. "You dig like you're being paid by the hole." Bishop ignored him. Caleb knelt and brushed snow aside with one glove. Beneath the powder, the surface was harder, compacted. Not natural melt and freeze. Compression. A track. He cleared more. The impression curved through the trees, half buried but still readable. Narrow tread, small commercial tires. Too deep for an ATV. Too neat for a ranch truck. It had passed this way after the last storm, before the newest snow covered it. Caleb's jaw tightened. The old trail was not marked on public road maps. Not anymore. Bishop moved a few yards ahead and pawed again. This time Caleb found a scrap of torn packaging caught beneath a branch. White plastic reinforced with silver lining, the kind used to protect temperature-sensitive supplies. One corner had a smear of pale residue. Not enough to identify by sight, but enough for Bishop to sneeze the moment Caleb held it near him. The same irritated sneeze he had given Mara's glove. Caleb sealed the scrap in a spare evidence bag from his medical pouch. It was not official procedure. It was a man trying not to contaminate the only facts the mountain had offered him. He stood and followed the tire marks. They did not cross the trail by accident. They ran parallel to it, hidden just inside the trees, then angled toward the northern fence line of Silver Elk property. Caleb moved slower now, noticing what he had missed for years because he had been away or unwilling to look too closely. A cut branch, old but clean. A small patch of bark scraped from a pine at bumper height. Snow packed where no footpath should be. Then he saw the fence. At first glance it looked intact. 3 rails, weathered and gray, running along the edge of the ranch like a tired promise. But Caleb had repaired enough fencing to know when wood had been disturbed. 2 rails near the lower draw were newer than the rest, stained to match. The wire behind them had been cut and rejoined with neat metal sleeves. Not vandalism, access. Someone had made a gate that did not look like a gate. For a long moment, Caleb did nothing. The cold entered his gloves. The valley widened below. Somewhere, a raven called once from the pines, black wings flashing between white branches like ink spilled on a wedding dress. His family's land had been used, not crossed by lost hunters, not by accident. Used. The anger that rose in him was quiet, and that made it worse. He thought of his father, who had never locked the barn when a storm was coming because a freezing man shouldn't have to solve a padlock. He thought of his mother leaving soup on the stove for stranded neighbors. He thought of his sister painting that ridiculous elk at the gate, giving the animal antlers $2,000 for its confused face. People had been welcomed here. That did not mean the land was free for thieves. Bishop came to stand beside him, not in front this time. Beside. Caleb rested one hand on the dog's head. "This isn't our piece, is it?" Bishop leaned into his leg. Caleb took out the phone. The safe number rang twice before clicking into a line of silence. Then Mara's voice came through, low and guarded. "Say 3 words." Caleb blinked. "That the password?" "Just do it." He looked down at the cut fence. "Silver? Elk? Fence?" A pause. Her voice changed. "Where are you?" "North line of my property. Your strange smell has friends?" He described the tracks, the packaging, the hidden cut in the fence. He did not exaggerate. He did not speculate. Mara listened without interrupting, which he appreciated more than reassurance. When he finished, she breathed out slowly. "You didn't touch the residue?" "Bagged the scrap, took photos, left the fence as it is." "Good." "You sound disappointed. I'm not completely useless." "I'm adjusting." Despite himself, Caleb smiled. It did not last. "I need to see it," Mara said. "Not here, not yet. If someone is using this route, meeting at the fence might tell them I found it." "Blue Lantern," she said after a moment. 2 hours. Sit where you can see the front and back doors." "I always do." "I figured." The line ended. Caleb looked once more at the hidden opening in the fence. Snow had softened its edges, but not enough. Secrets were rarely invisible. Most of the time, people simply agreed not to look. He and Bishop returned by a different path, staying on exposed rock where they could leave fewer tracks. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun had begun to sink, and the porch light was glowing again. Caleb placed the evidence bag beside Mara's glove. 2 small things on a kitchen table. A glove, a scrap of medical packaging. Neither looked powerful enough to trouble a town. Then again, neither did a match, until it found dry hay. Blue Lantern Diner sat near the center of Sawtooth, wedged between the feed store and a closed barber shop with a spinning pole that had not spun since autumn. Its windows glowed warm against the early dark, fogged at the edges from coffee steam and human breath. A blue neon lantern buzzed above the door, flickering occasionally as if unsure whether hope was worth the electric bill. Inside, the diner smelled of fried potatoes, old wood, cinnamon, and wet wool. Caleb took a booth near the back, where he could see both exits. Bishop settled beneath the table with the long, suffering sigh of a creature denied the menu. A waitress passed, saw the dog's solemn face, and whispered, "Don't look at me like that, honey. I'm weak." "You're not feeding him," Caleb said. "Wasn't planning to," she lied. Mara arrived 10 minutes later. She wore civilian clothes, dark jeans, boots, a gray turtleneck beneath a navy coat. A cream scarf hid most of the bruising along her collarbone, but the faint mark near her hairline remained. Her hair was tied low, and she moved carefully, not enough for others to notice, enough for Caleb to know her ribs still punished her. She slid into the booth across from him. "You look terrible," Caleb said. "You always start with charm?" "Only when I'm concerned." "Then try less concern." Bishop nudged his head against her knee from under the table. Her expression softened before she could stop it. "Hello, traitor." The dog's tail thumped once. Before Caleb could pass her the photos, a woman appeared beside the table, carrying a coffee pot, like a queen carrying a scepter. Nora Pike did not walk through the Blue Lantern so much as command its weather. She was 62, short, round-faced, with silver curls pinned back by a red clip, and eyes warm enough to invite confession, sharp enough to punish lies. A pencil rested behind one ear. Her navy apron bore the diner's logo, though flour dust had claimed most of the lantern. "Well," Nora said, looking from Caleb to Mara to Bishop, "if this isn't a meeting that says don't ask questions, I've lost my professional touch." "Nora," Caleb said. "Caleb Rourke." Her smile flickered with something old and tender. "You look like your father when he was about to pretend he wasn't worried." "That often?" "Constantly." She poured coffee without asking. Then she bent slightly and looked under the table. "And you must be Bishop." Bishop gave her his most judicial stare. Nora nodded gravely. "Judge Fuzzy." "Pleasure?" Mara almost choked on her coffee. Caleb closed his eyes for half a second. "Please don't encourage him." "I encourage whoever I like." Nora set the pot down and lowered her voice. The warmth did not leave her face, but the diner seemed to fade around them. "You two are not the first to ask quiet questions about white vans." Mara went still. Nora looked toward the front counter where two men in plow jackets argued about hockey and pie. Then back to the booth. "Last 3 winters," she said, "always after midnight, always when weather is bad enough that folks mind their own fireplaces. White vans, no markings sometimes, medical plates other times. They take the old logging spur north of town." Caleb's fingers tightened around his mug. "That spur crosses near my fence." "I know." Nora's eyes rested on him with apology. She did not speak. "Your daddy would have raised hell if he'd known." "Why didn't anyone say anything?" Nora's smile faded. For the first time, she looked tired. "Because in this town, everybody owes somebody, and most of those debts got Gideon Vale's name somewhere near the bottom." Mara said nothing. Nora continued quietly. "My neighbor's husband got a generator during the ice outage because of Vale winter relief. The church roof got fixed after the spring storm. Old Mr. Hanley got his insulin delivered when the pass closed. You start asking questions about the man who kept your people warm, fed, and medicated, folks look at you like you're spitting on the altar." "And you?" Caleb asked. Nora gave him a dry look. "Honey, I own a diner. I spit professionally, but only in private." Despite the weight at the table, Mara's mouth twitched. Nora reached into her apron and pulled out a folded napkin. On it, written in pencil, were 3 partial plate numbers and dates. "I write down things that don't belong," she said. "Old habit. Your father used to do the same, only he pretended it was because he liked lists." Caleb took the napkin slowly. The paper felt lighter than it should have. Nora straightened before anyone at the counter could notice the conversation had changed. "Pie's fresh. Dog gets nothing unless he learns to tip." She walked away, leaving coffee, warmth, and a piece of evidence disguised as diner trash. Mara unfolded the napkin beside Caleb's photos. For a while, neither spoke. Outside, snow began again, soft against the glass. Inside, the diner carried on. Forks tapping plates, someone laughing near the counter, boots squeaking on the mat. Ordinary life, Caleb thought, had an astonishing talent for continuing beside danger. Mara finally looked at him. "This isn't just evergreen." "No, it's logistics, roots, people looking away." "And land," Caleb said. "Mine included." She studied his face. "That makes you angry." "It should." "It does, but anger is going to make you move too fast." Caleb looked toward Bishop. The dog lay with his head on his paws, eyes open, watching both of them as if waiting to see which human would become foolish first. Caleb exhaled. "My father used those trails to bring people home during storms," he said. "Someone turned them into a back door." Mara's expression changed then. Not pity. Pity would have irritated him. This was recognition, the look of a person seeing the exact place where a wound and a duty had become the same thing. "We don't rush," she said. "We document. We compare routes. We find who signs the paper and who drives the vans." "We?" She held his gaze. "You called me." "You gave me the number." "That's not an answer." Caleb looked at the napkin, the photos, the faint grease ring from a coffee mug spreading near the pencil marks. Evidence did not always arrive in clean folders. Sometimes it came on paper that smelled like pie. "I'm not joining your investigation," he said. Mara raised an eyebrow. "I'm protecting my land." "Of course." "And my dog found the first piece." "Naturally." "And I don't like vans using my fence." "Very civic-minded." Caleb almost smiled again. Almost had become a busier country lately. Nora returned with 2 slices of pie neither of them had ordered. She set one in front of Caleb, one in front of Mara, and slipped a small piece of plain crust under the table without looking. Bishop accepted it with holy reverence. "I saw that," Caleb said. "No, you didn't," Nora replied. Mara's laugh was quieter this time, less pained than before. For a few minutes, the table held something dangerously close to normal: coffee, pie, a dog committing minor theft, and two people pretending the world outside was not narrowing around them. Then Mara folded the napkin and placed it inside her coat. "I'll check the partial plates against county records," she said. "Carefully. I'll map every place that track could enter Silver Elk." "Carefully." "I heard you the first time." "I'm saying it again because you look like a man who respects danger, but not always consequences." Caleb looked through the diner window, past the reflection of warm lights, toward the dark outline of the mountains. "Consequences usually find me without help." Mara did not answer quickly. When she did, her voice had less edge. "Maybe this time, don't go meet them alone." The words landed differently than warning. Caleb looked back at her. For a moment, the investigation stepped aside, and there were only two tired people sitting in a diner while snow stitched the town shut around them. Mara had not asked him to save her. She had asked him not to disappear into the kind of man who thought being alone was the same as being strong. Bishop lifted his head under the table and pressed his shoulder against Caleb's boot. A ridiculous, hairy punctuation mark. Caleb nodded once. "All right," he said. "Not alone." Mara accepted that with the smallest tilt of her head. Outside, beyond the diner windows and the warm blue lantern buzzing above the door, Sawtooth Valley lay under its bright winter covering. The clinic's green cross glowed on the far side of town, serene and benevolent. The kind of light people trusted when they were cold, frightened, or in pain. Caleb looked at it for a long time. Then he looked down at Nora's napkin, half hidden beneath Mara's hand. The town had not buried the truth deeply. It had simply learned to step over it. Silver Elk Ranch had always been full of doors Caleb did not open unless he had to. The pantry door, because his mother's handwriting still lived on old labels taped to glass jars. The tack room, because his sister's laughter seemed to hang there whenever sunlight crossed the saddles. His father's office, because it was not really an office anymore. It was a room where dust had learned to stand guard. That morning, Caleb opened it. The door stuck at first, swollen by years of winter damp. He put one shoulder into it, and the old wood gave with a complaint that sounded almost human. Bishop slipped in before him, nose low, tail still, stepping lightly as if even a dog understood this was not a room to charge into. The office smelled of paper, leather, pipe tobacco, long faded into the walls, and the dry sweetness of cedar shavings. Morning light fell through the narrow window, catching dust in the air. Caleb stood still in the doorway, feeling the strange resistance of old places. They did not stop a man with locks. They stopped him by asking whether he was ready to remember. His father's oak desk sat beneath the window. Same desk, same brass lamp, same green blotter with a corner curled upward. A steel thermos stood on one shelf, dented near the base. His father had carried it in the snowplow truck for 15 winters, claiming coffee tasted better when it had survived a crash. Caleb touched it with 2 fingers and nearly smiled. Nearly. Bishop sniffed along the baseboards, then lay down beside the desk, his amber eyes watching Caleb with quiet concern. "I'm fine," Caleb said. The dog did not appear convinced. Caleb opened the top drawer. Old receipts, rusted paper clips, a church raffle ticket from 12 years ago. A photograph of his father standing beside a snow-covered fence, younger than Caleb was now, grinning like a man who had just beaten the mountain in an argument. The second drawer held maps. Not printed county maps alone. Hand-drawn ones. Pages of heavy paper marked in pencil, ink, and old grease stains. Caleb spread them across the desk one by one. The valley unfolded beneath his hands. Raven Cut, Blue Lantern Road, North Spur, Cedar Wash, Old Miller Bridge, Silver Elk Boundary, the Breathing Road. His father's marks were everywhere. Small arrows, weather notes, places where drifts formed early, places where engines stalled, places where a man on horseback could still pass when wheels could not. One symbol appeared near the northern fence. 3 short strokes. 1 circle. Caleb leaned closer. He had seen that mark before, carved into the split cedar at the trailhead. His father had used it to mark winter rescue routes, paths that led stranded people toward shelter. But beside this symbol, written in his father's firm, slanted hand, were words Caleb had not expected. Do not reopen for freight. Ground unstable. Refused Vail WL request. Caleb read it twice. Vail, WL, Vail Winter Logistics. A coldness settled behind his ribs, different from fear, sharper than anger. He found more notes clipped beneath the map. Dates, names. A short memo his father had written to the county land office, refusing temporary access across Silver Elk property. The language was plain, stubborn, and exactly like him. Road built for emergency rescue, not commercial haulage. Too narrow after lower draw. Risk of slide during thaw. Request denied. Caleb sat slowly in the old chair. It creaked beneath him. For a moment he saw his father not as a memory, but as a man at this very desk, writing those lines with snow outside the window and coffee going cold beside his hand. Not fighting a war. Not exposing evil. Just doing the small, unglamorous work of saying no when no needed saying. And after he died, someone had waited. Someone had come back to the land when the man who guarded it could no longer answer. Bishop rose and pressed his head against Caleb's knee. Caleb laid a hand between the dog's ears. "Yeah," he whispered. "I know." The call to Emmett Voss took 3 tries. The old man answered on the 4th ring with a voice like gravel dropped into a tin cup. "If this is about insurance, I already died last spring and you missed your chance." "It's Caleb Rourke." A pause, then the voice softened without becoming gentle. "Well, I'll be damned," little Caleb with the serious eyes. "I'm 51, Emmett." "Still little if I knew you before you could saddle a pony without falling on your backside." Caleb looked at Bishop. "I need to ask you about Vail Winter Logistics." Silence came through the line, not confusion, recognition. "You found something," Emmett said. "I found my father's notes, a denied access request. Northern fence." Another pause, longer this time. "Come by the plow yard," Emmett said. "Don't bring a crowd." The county plow yard sat behind an old maintenance shed west of town, where snowbanks grew dirty and high from repeated clearing. Emmett Voss lived in a trailer beside it, though Caleb suspected the county had stopped officially allowing that years ago and simply lacked the courage to tell him. Emmett was waiting outside when Caleb arrived, bundled in a mustard-yellow plow jacket, so faded it looked like a relic from another century. He was shorter than Caleb remembered, or perhaps age had pulled him down, but his shoulders remained broad under the coat. A gray beard roughened his jaw, and his face was lined like a hand-drawn map of every road he had ever cleared. He squinted at Bishop first. "That dog judging me?" "Yes." "Good. Means he's got standards." Inside the trailer, heat blasted from a small iron stove. Maps covered one wall, not decorative maps, working maps, folded, pinned, stained, annotated until the roads looked like veins in a tired body. Emmett listened as Caleb explained what he had found. The hidden fence cut, the packaging, Nora's plate numbers, Mara's crash, though Caleb kept her name out of anything unnecessary. The old man chewed on the inside of his cheek. Silas Trent, he said at last. Caleb had never met the man, but the name seemed to darken the little room. Who is he? Used to run rescue on the winter roads. Good at it, too. Could read ice better than most folks read scripture. Pulled people out of ditches, found lost hunters, once drove a plow through a whiteout to get a pregnant woman to Evergreen. Emmett took a battered paper map from the wall and spread it across the table. Then Gideon Vale hired him. Better money, better truck, cleaner coat. Folks still think of Silas as the man who saves them from snowbanks. His mouth twisted. That's the trick with useful men. Nobody asks what else they learned while being useful. He tapped the northern edge of Silver Elk property. After your father passed, Silas asked me twice about that old route. Said it might help with emergency supply deliveries. I told him Harold Rourke said no when alive, and I didn't figure death made him more agreeable. Despite himself, Caleb heard his father in that sentence and felt the old ache move. Did he drop it? Emmett snorted. Men like that don't drop. They set things down where you can't see them. Caleb took a photograph of Emmett's marked route and left with more questions than he had brought. By late afternoon, Mara arrived at Silver Elk Ranch in a navy coat and winter boots, her hair tied low, the bruise on her face fading into yellow at the edges. She moved better than before, though pain still flickered when she climbed the porch steps. Caleb opened the door before she knocked. "You look less terrible," he said. "You look more angry." "Efficient." Still not the same thing. Bishop greeted her by pressing his shoulder into her leg, then immediately turning toward the hallway, as if the meeting agenda had already been distributed. Mara looked down. He always this bossy? Only with people he respects. Or suspects. With Bishop, those overlap. Caleb led her into his father's office. The maps lay across the desk beneath the brass lamp. Mara did not touch them right away. She stood a moment in the doorway, reading the room, not like a crime scene, but like a place that had belonged to someone loved. This was your father's? Still is, in some ways. She nodded, softer than he expected. Then she put on gloves and began photographing the documents. Mara worked carefully, not dramatically. She labeled each image, noted dates, compared Caleb's father's writing to the land office memo. Caleb watched her build order out of grief and paper. "This matters," she said. "It proves he refused access. It proves someone knew access mattered." That distinction landed hard. Bishop had wandered out during the documentation. Now he returned to the office doorway, gave one soft bark, and disappeared again. Caleb and Mara followed him through the back hall, across the mudroom, and out to the old tool shed behind the horse barn. The shed leaned slightly east, as if it had been listening to mountain gossip for too long. Snow piled against one wall. The door hinges groaned when Caleb opened it. Inside, the air was colder than outside. Old tools hung from pegs. Rusted horseshoes filled a bucket. A cracked workbench sat beneath a small window, crusted with frost. Bishop moved straight to a stack of loose floorboards near the rear corner. "Not another performance," Caleb muttered. The dog pawed once, then looked at him. Mara crouched carefully, shining her flashlight along the boards. These were moved recently. Caleb could see it too. Dust disturbed. One nail not fully seated. He lifted the first board with a pry bar, then the second. Beneath was a shallow cavity. Not large. Large enough. They found 3 empty medical supply cartons, flattened and folded. Labels had been scraped nearly clean, but not perfectly. A faint barcode remained on one corner. There were also strips of silver-lined packaging like the scrap from the trail, and a small plastic cap from a refrigerated vial container. Mara did not smile. Investigators in bad stories smiled when they found evidence. Mara only became stiller. "That's clinic-grade packaging," she said. "Could it have blown here? Through a closed shed and under floorboards?" Trying to be optimistic, don't. It makes you sound unnatural." Caleb huffed once. She photographed everything before allowing him to lift the cartons. She sealed what she could, marked the location, and wrote notes in a small blue leather notebook. Her handwriting was tight, controlled, almost severe. Then she stepped outside and made a call from the edge of the yard where the signal came and went in thin, unreliable breaths. Caleb stood a few yards away, pretending not to listen. "Rowan," she said quietly. "It's me." The voice on the other end was too faint for Caleb to make out. Mara turned her back to the wind. "No, don't say my name on this line again. Just listen. I need you to check whether Vail Winter Logistics had any emergency transport authorizations tied to Evergreen in the past 18 months. A pause. "I know what that could mean for you." Another pause. Longer. Her voice softened, but did not weaken. "How's your mother?" Caleb looked toward the mountains. So that was the hook. A man with a sick mother. A deputy afraid to choose between truth and the clinic keeping her alive. When Mara ended the call, she returned with a face carved by worry. "Deputy Rowan Kessler," she said before Caleb asked. "He's decent. Scared but decent." Scared of Gideon? Scared of losing the only place managing his mother's treatment. Caleb glanced back at the shed. That's how Vail keeps people quiet. It's one way. And the doctor? Mara hesitated. Dr. Lillian Crow runs Evergreen. She saved half this valley at one time or another. I don't think she's the architect. Her mouth tightened. But I think she signed things she shouldn't have. Why? Because people do terrible math when the alternative is watching something good die. That sentence stayed with Caleb. As evening moved in, they carried the sealed evidence back to the kitchen. Caleb placed his father's map on the table beside the cartons. The old rescue route, the hidden fence, the medical packaging, pieces of a thing too ugly to name yet. Anger rose in him again. Not hot, worse, clean. They used my land, he said. They used my father's road. Mara looked up from her notes. Yes. I can cut the fence open tonight, put cameras on the draw, catch the next vehicle. And when they find the cameras, they won't. You don't know that. I know enough. No, Mara said, sharper now. You know tactics. This needs evidence that survives court. Caleb turned on her. And while we build a perfect file, they keep moving supplies through my land. If we move wrong, Gideon makes this about trespassing, tampering, harassment. He paints you as a grieving veteran with a vendetta, and me as an injured deputy chasing shadows. The words struck because they were too precise. Bishop stepped between them. Not dramatically, not barking. He simply walked into the space carrying something in his mouth. A folded cloth, blue once, now faded almost gray. Caleb went still. Bishop came to him and placed the cloth at his feet. His mother's scarf, not the one from the hall shelf. No, this was older. A work scarf she used to wear in the barn, tucked for years in the tool shed, smelling faintly of cedar dust, wool, and a memory Caleb had no defense against. He bent and picked it up. The kitchen changed. The anger did not vanish, but it lost its throne. He remembered his mother wrapping the scarf around her neck before carrying soup to a stranded lineman during a blizzard. He remembered her telling him, when he was 17 and furious about something small, that a man could burn down a fence to prove it was his, but then all he owned was ashes. Mara said nothing. That was wise of her. Caleb closed his hand around the scarf. For the first time that day, he breathed fully. They don't get to turn this place into a weapon, he said, quieter now. No, Mara replied. They don't. But I don't get to either. Her expression softened. No. Bishop sat beside Caleb, ears forward, looking unbearably satisfied with himself. Caleb looked down at him. You're getting smug in your old age. The dog's tail tapped once. Night settled beyond the windows. The porch light came on automatically, casting warm gold over the snow. On the kitchen table, his father's map lay open, no longer only a relic. Beside it sat medical cartons, evidence bags, Mara's notebook, and his mother's scarf. The dead had not spoken. They had left enough behind for the living to choose properly. Caleb touched the old map with one hand and the faded scarf with the other. Silver Elk Ranch had kept its secrets. Now it was asking what he would do with them. The blue lantern looked gentler from the outside than it had any right to. Snow fell in wide, slow flakes that evening, turning Sawtooth's main street into something almost ceremonial. The feed store wore a white roof. The closed barber shop had frost flowers across its windows. A string of yellow bulbs sagged above the diner's entrance, trembling in the wind like small stars that had agreed to work overtime. Caleb parked across the street and sat for a moment with both hands still on the wheel. Bishop occupied the passenger seat, upright and dignified, his olive harness freshly brushed, his black and gold coat gleaming in the dashboard light. He stared at the diner as if reviewing security before allowing civilians to eat pancakes. "This is dinner," Caleb said, "not a raid." Bishop's left ear twitched, the torn edge catching the glow from the street lamp. "I'm serious. No tactical decisions under the table." The dog looked at him. Caleb sighed. "Fine. Limited tactical decisions?" He stepped out into the cold. Tonight was supposed to be simple, at least on paper. Mara had insisted on keeping her promise. Dinner, a public place, no long mountain trails, no hidden fence cuts, no old cartons under floorboards, just 2 adults, 1 dog, and Nora Pike's famous pot roast. But Caleb knew simple things were often the hardest. He could walk into hostile territory with steadier hands than he could walk into a diner knowing a woman had invited him there not because she needed rescuing, but because she remembered he had treated her like a person when fear had tried to reduce her to evidence. Inside, the blue lantern glowed with golden light. Heat rolled over him first, thick with coffee, fried onions, cinnamon, wet wool, and old wood. Boots squeaked near the doormat. Someone laughed from the counter. A man in a plow jacket complained that his cousin's snowblower had the soul of a coward. Nora Pike moved between tables with a coffee pot in one hand and command of the known universe in the other. She spotted Caleb and Bishop at once. "Well, if it isn't the tall, quiet one in his honor." Bishop's tail gave one approving sweep. "Don't start," Caleb said. "I never start anything," Nora said, which was such a magnificent lie that even the man at the counter snorted. "Back booth's open." Caleb took the booth where he could see the front door, kitchen entrance, hallway, and most of the windows. It was not paranoia if the world had been rude enough to prove him right. Bishop settled beneath the table, directly between Caleb's boots, then turned so he could watch the room. Mara arrived 7 minutes later. She came through the door with snow in her hair and one hand tucked into the pocket of her navy coat. Civilian clothes made her seem less guarded at first glance. Dark jeans, gray sweater, cream scarf, boots dusted white. But Caleb noticed what others would not. She paused just long enough to see the room. She chose the path that kept her back from the front windows. She smiled at Nora, but her eyes did not stop working. Then she saw Caleb. Something eased. Not much. Enough. "You came," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "You invited Bishop." "I invited you." "He has legal counsel." Bishop gave a soft huff from under the table. Mara looked down. "Hello, counsel." The dog placed his chin on her boot with judicial solemnity. Caleb frowned. "He doesn't do that for everyone." "I have a trustworthy boot." "Apparently." Nora appeared with menus no one needed. "Pot roast, trout, or chicken stew. If either of you orders salad in this weather, I'll assume a medical emergency." "Pot roast," Mara said. Same, Caleb added. Nora looked beneath the table. And for Judge Fuzzy? Nothing, Caleb said. Nora gave him the sorrowful look one might give a man who had just kicked a hymn book. Cruelty in my establishment. Tragic. Nora? I heard you. She walked away. Didn't say I agreed. For the first few minutes, conversation kept to safe ground. Weather, road conditions, the fact that Bishop had tracked melted snow across Caleb's kitchen that morning and then looked offended when accused. Mara spoke carefully, but not stiffly. Her ribs were healing. She moved better now. The cut near her hairline had faded to a thin red mark. Caleb noticed the small signs of recovery with a quiet relief he did not name. Nora brought coffee, then bread, then pot roast steaming beneath dark gravy. When she passed behind Bishop, her hand lowered briefly. Caleb caught the motion. Nora? What? Did you just give my dog beef? I dropped it. From your hand? Gravity is mysterious. Mara laughed, not the brief, careful sound from the ranch. This one came easier, fuller, surprising even her. She pressed one hand lightly to her side afterward, but the smile remained. Caleb found himself stilling at the sight of it. He had seen Mara wary, injured, angry, controlled. He had not seen her unguarded. It changed the shape of her face. It did not make her softer exactly. It made her more alive. Bishop chewed under the table with the grave concentration of a priest receiving sacrament. You're corrupting him, Caleb said. He's 8, Nora called from the counter. He was corrupt before I got here. Mara's smile lingered. She has a point. She usually does. That's the problem. The meal warmed the table between them. For a while, the case sat beside them rather than between them. Caleb told Mara about his father opening the barn during storms, no matter who came knocking. Once, a traveling salesman had slept in the tack room and tried to pay Harold Rourke with a box of imitation pearl buttons. Did he take them? Mara asked. He said no, my mother took them. What did she do with imitation pearl buttons? Put them on my sister's winter coat, made her look like a very small, furious duchess. Mara laughed again, quieter but real. Then she looked down into her coffee. My mother would have liked that. Caleb did not fill the silence too quickly. Some doors opened only if no one shoved them. Mara turned the mug slowly between her hands. She had an accident on High Basin Road when I was 23. Snow squall came in fast. Car went off near the old cattle guard. She didn't die there. Her voice remained steady, which somehow made it heavier. She died because help took too long getting there, and everyone spent the hearing talking about weather, like weather had been driving the ambulance. Caleb's fingers rested around his fork. I'm sorry. I hated that phrase for a long time. I still mean it. I know. She looked up. That's why I don't hate it from you. The words landed quietly. Around them, the diner continued its ordinary music. Plates, coffee, low voices. Nora scolding someone for pretending ketchup counted as a vegetable. But at the booth, something had narrowed and deepened. Not romance exactly. Not yet. Recognition. Two people standing on opposite sides of different graves and realizing the snow over both looked very much the same. Caleb set his fork down. I came back to Silver Elk because I thought the house might be easier than people. And? He glanced toward Bishop. The dog is manageable. Bishop's head rose under the table. You know I'm lying, Caleb said. Mara watched him, not pushing. My family left in pieces, he said. Not all at once. That might have been easier. My mother first. Cancer. My sister a few years later. Bad road. My father held on longest, long enough for everyone to think he'd out-stubborn mortality. Mara's eyes softened. He didn't? No, but he made it inconvenient. That drew a small smile from her. Caleb looked toward the frosted window. The ranch is full of them, not in some dramatic way, just a mug in the wrong cabinet, a mark on a doorframe, a scarf in the shed. You think grief is supposed to roar. Most days it nags. "My mother's coat still hangs in my hall closet," Mara said. "I tell myself I keep it because it's a good coat." "Is it?" "Terrible coat." He smiled. For a moment, neither of them looked away. Then Nora arrived with 2 slices of pie and a face too innocent to be believed. "Didn't order pie," Caleb said. "Town policy." "There is no town policy." "There is now." Nora set the plates down. Her hand lingered near Mara's side of the table, and something small passed from her apron pocket beneath the edge of the napkin dispenser. Not dramatic, not hidden well enough to be insulting. Mara's eyes flicked down. Nora's voice remained casual. "Found that in an old receipt box while looking for Christmas ribbons. Thought maybe you'd appreciate the handwriting." Caleb did not move until Nora walked away. Mara pulled the object into her lap. A faded envelope, yellowed at the corners, sealed once and reopened more than once. Inside was a photocopied transport receipt. Vail, Winter Logistics. Date from 2 winters ago. Delivery type marked as emergency medical refrigeration support. But there was no address, only coordinates. Caleb leaned closer. He knew those numbers before Mara finished reading them. "Ravencut," he said. Mara's mouth tightened. "Near where I was hit." "There's more." A small digital authorization code appeared at the bottom, tied to an Evergreen Rural Clinic account. Not a doctor's signature, not yet a smoking gun. But a door? A real one? Mara folded the receipt carefully. Nora shouldn't have this, which means someone thought it was worthless, or thought no one would know what the coordinates meant. Across the diner, the front door opened. Cold air swept in, carrying snow and diesel. Conversations did not stop. That would have been too obvious. But they bent slightly, like grass under an unseen foot. A man entered wearing a dark winter jacket under a black vest marked with the silver and green logo of Vail Winter Logistics. He was lean, a little over 6 feet, with weathered skin, narrow brown eyes, and a smile that seemed to know its way around every table. His hair was dark blonde under a knit cap. He stamped snow from his boots and lifted a hand toward the counter. "Nora Pike," he called. "Tell me you didn't make that soup angry again." Nora's face did not change. "Soup was born angry, Silas. I just raised it right." Silas Trent laughed like a regular man. That was what made Caleb watch him harder. Silas moved through the diner with the ease of someone who had fixed tires, pulled trucks from ditches, and remembered which old men liked their coffee black. He clapped one man on the shoulder, asked another about his knee, nodded to a plow driver by name. Then his eyes found Mara. Concern appeared on his face so smoothly it might have been practiced in church glass. "Deputy Ellison," he said, approaching their booth, "heard you had yourself a scare." Mara tucked the receipt beneath her coat with no visible hurry. "Roads were bad." "They get that way." Silas's gaze dipped briefly to her healing cut. "Glad you came through." Caleb felt Bishop shift beneath the table. Not a growl, a stillness. Silas looked at him then. "You must be Rourke." Caleb did not offer his hand. "Caleb." "Silas Trent. I knew your dad a bit. Good man. Hard no, but fair. High praise. In my line of work, a fair no is better than a crooked yes." Silas smiled, then glanced under the table. "That's a fine shepherd." Bishop stared at him. Silas chuckled. "Not easily impressed, is he?" "No. I like that in a dog." His eyes returned to Caleb. "Silver Elk's a beautiful place. Isolated, though. Hard property to keep safe in winter. Old barns, old wiring, roads that don't always show who came and went." The sentence was polite, so polite it arrived wearing gloves. Mara's face revealed nothing. Caleb felt the room sharpen around the edges. "Managed so far," he said. Silas nodded. "Your father did. Different times." "Not that different." For the first time, the smile in Silas's eyes thinned. Then Nora called from the counter. "Silas, you eating or decorating my floor?" "Eating," he said easily, stepping back. "Good seeing you both." He walked away to the counter, ordered coffee, and joined a conversation about plow routes as if he had not just placed a warning on the table between the salt and pepper. Mara waited until the diner noise covered them again. "Now you've met him. He talks like a man sanding the handle of a knife." "That's specific." "I'm trying to be charitable." Bishop pressed against Caleb's boot, body tense. Caleb looked down once, then back at Mara. "He knows. He suspects." "That's enough." Mara unfolded the receipt under the table where no one else could see. "This has to leave the county circle." "Owen Bellamy?" She looked surprised. "You know him?" "My father trusted him to return borrowed tools. That was his highest civic honor." Mara breathed through a short laugh. "Sheriff Owen Bellamy isn't dirty, but he believes in reputation. Gideon has spent 20 years building one big enough to hide behind." "Then we give him something too solid to ignore." "My thought exactly." Her phone buzzed. She glanced down and went very still. Caleb watched her face close into work. "What?" Mara turned the screen slightly so only he could see. A text from Rowan Kessler. No greeting, no explanation. Just an audio file and a line beneath it. "I should have sent this sooner. I'm sorry." Mara put in one earbud and listened, her expression hardening by degrees. Caleb did not ask until she removed it. "Radio traffic from the night of my crash," she said softly. "And?" "Someone redirected my patrol route to Ravencut. Then the log was altered afterward." Caleb looked toward the counter. Silas was laughing at something Nora had said, coffee cup in hand, face open, and neighborly beneath the golden lights. Mara's hand closed around the phone. "Rowan isn't ready to go on record," she said, "but this is the first time he's chosen truth over fear." Caleb looked at her. "And you?" "I'm taking it to Owen," she said, "not as accusation, as pattern." "And if Owen refuses to see it?" Her eyes moved to the diner window, where snow slid down the glass in thin, shining lines. "Then we make the pattern impossible to ignore." Nora came by once more, refilling coffee she knew they would not drink. Her voice was light, but her eyes were on Silas at the counter. "Pie okay?" "Perfect," Mara said. "Good." Nora glanced down at Bishop. "How about you, Your Honor?" Bishop gave a single low breath. Nora's smile faded just slightly. She understood dogs better than many people understood warnings. When Silas finally left, he raised a hand to the room. Snow swallowed him beyond the glass. The blue lantern's warmth rushed back into the space he had occupied, but not completely. Some cold stayed behind. Caleb and Mara sat in silence for a moment. Not the silence of strangers anymore. The silence of people standing at the edge of a decision and hearing the ice crack beneath it. Mara slipped the receipt into an inner pocket. Dinner wasn't supposed to become evidence. Caleb looked at the empty pie plate, the coffee rings, the spot beneath the table where Bishop had accepted bribes with no shame. Maybe evidence wanted better lighting. She smiled despite herself. Then the smile faded into something steadier. "Thank you for coming." "You already said I didn't save you for dinner." "You didn't." She held his gaze. "I asked you because I wanted 1 hour where the whole world wasn't a case file." Caleb did not know what to do with that kind of honesty, so he gave her some back. "I wanted that too." For once, neither of them turned it into a joke. Outside, Sawtooth Valley glimmered beneath fresh snow. The clinic's green cross shone at the far end of town, bright and benevolent in the dark, like a lantern hung over a locked door. Inside the blue lantern, Bishop rested his head across Caleb's boot, and Mara's boot both, pinning them in place with the quiet authority of an old dog who had decided that neither human would be permitted to stand alone. Caleb looked down at him, then across at Mara. "All right," he said. "We take it to Owen." Mara nodded. "And after that?" Caleb looked toward the window where Silas Trent's tire tracks were already softening under new snow. "After that," he said, "we stop stepping over the truth." The mountain looked almost peaceful after the storm. Moonlight poured over Sawtooth Valley in a silver wash, turning every fence rail, pine branch, and rooftop into something carved from bone and glass. Snow lay smooth across the fields, but Caleb Rourke knew better than to trust a clean surface. Winter was a patient liar. It covered tracks, softened edges, and made danger look holy. He stood at the north edge of Silver Elk Ranch with Bishop beside him and Mara Ellison a few steps away, checking the settings on her camera. They had not come as vigilantes. Mara had made that clear twice. 3 times if Caleb counted the look she gave him when he packed an extra coil of rope, flares, and a pry bar. "This is observation," she said quietly. "Observation with practical accessories." "Caleb!" "I heard you." Bishop gave a low huff as if agreeing with Mara on principle. Caleb looked down at him. "You're supposed to be on my side." The old German shepherd stood in his olive harness, black and gold coat bright beneath the moon. His torn left ear twitched toward the timberline. He had been restless since sundown, not frantic, but focused in that grim, working way that always made Caleb trust the dog's silence more than most men's speeches. Mara zipped a small evidence pouch inside her coat. She wore her navy winter parka, dark pants, and boots fitted with ice cleats. Her service weapon rested at her side, but her hands moved first to the camera, the notebook, the sealed bags. A deputy first, a survivor second. A woman who had learned the hard way that truth needed packaging strong enough to make it into court. "If we confirm movement," she said, "I notify Owen with the file bundle and location. We do not engage unless someone is in immediate danger." Caleb looked past her toward the old logging spur hidden among the pines. "And if Silas decides immediate danger for us? Then we improvise carefully." "That's almost a plan." "It's a law enforcement plan. We leave room for disappointment." Despite the cold, Caleb smiled. They moved out along the breathing road. The trail his father had once used for rescue now ran beneath their boots like an old vein. Caleb led through the first stretch, choosing patches of exposed rock and harder snow to reduce their trail. Bishop moved ahead only when given room, nose low, body balanced, reading the invisible world beneath the visible one. Mara followed with careful steps, pausing now and then to photograph tire marks already half-filled by drifting snow. The old route curved through dense pines, dipped along a frozen creek bed, then climbed toward a narrow saddle overlooking the north draw. From there, they could see the hidden cut in the fence, and beyond it, the darker line of the service road that should have been abandoned years ago. At 10:42 p.m., lights appeared below. Not headlights on the main road. Lower, slower. 2 white vans moved along the service track with their beams dimmed, engines muffled by snow and distance. A smaller utility truck followed behind. No sirens, no markings bright enough for a passing driver to remember. Just clean white shapes slipping through the night like fish under ice. Mara lifted her camera. Click, click, click. Caleb watched the lead van stop near the hidden access point. 2 men got out and opened the rear doors. Another figure stepped from the utility truck carrying a tablet. Boxes were moved quickly, not carelessly. Silver-lined containers, folded cartons, gray document bags. Medical freight, Mara whispered, or pretending to be. She zoomed in and took another series of photos. Bishop stiffened. Caleb felt it through the leash. The dog's attention had shifted from the vans to the far side of the draw, where a second trail led toward the old wooden bridge. A lone figure stood there, half hidden by a pine, smaller than the men unloading cargo. Not a driver. Mara saw her at the same time. The figure stepped into a blade of moonlight. A woman in a beige parka, medical bag hanging from one shoulder, red-brown hair tucked beneath a knit cap. Even from that distance, Caleb could read the posture, exhausted, reluctant, trapped in her own skin. Mara lowered the camera slowly. Lillian Crow. The doctor? Yes. Below, one of the drivers handed Lillian a clipboard. She signed something with a hand that hesitated before touching the page. The man beside her said something Caleb could not hear. Lillian's shoulders tightened. She shook her head once. The man leaned closer. This time she signed. Mara's jaw hardened. I need her alive, talking, and not warned into running. You think she'll talk? I think she's already drowning. They waited until the vans began rolling toward the bridge. Lillian stayed behind for a moment, holding the clipboard against her chest like a shield that had failed. Mara signaled Caleb, and they descended through the trees. Bishop reached Lillian first. He did not growl. He did not bare his teeth. He walked out of the shadows, snow whispering beneath his paws, and sat directly in front of her. Lillian froze. Then Caleb and Mara stepped into view. The doctor's face changed from fear to recognition, then to something far worse. Shame. Mara, she said. Her voice was small in the winter air. Mara kept her weapon low, but ready. Dr. Crow. Lillian looked at Caleb, then Bishop, then the dark road where the vans had gone. She was in her late 40s, compact and pale from too many nights indoors, with green eyes ringed by sleeplessness. A stethoscope peeked from the open flap of her medical bag like a relic of a better oath. You shouldn't be here, Lillian whispered. Neither should those vans, Mara said. Lillian's mouth trembled. It wasn't supposed to become this. That sentence did more than any confession could have. Mara stepped closer, but her voice stayed controlled. What wasn't? Lillian looked down at Bishop. The dog's amber eyes did not accuse. They simply waited. Perhaps that was worse. I signed adjusted records, Lillian said. At first it was small, extra supply claims, extended treatment codes. Gideon said the clinic would close if we didn't stabilize the books. People needed us. They still need us. And the missing medication? I thought it was inventory balancing. Tears gathered, but did not fall. I told myself I wasn't asking because asking would take away the excuse. Mara's face held steady, but Caleb saw the pain move through her. Did you know about my crash? Lillian looked up sharply. No? Did you know Silas was moving controlled medication through Silver Elk land? No. Then, quieter. Not until tonight. Behind them, the sound of an engine changed. Bishop turned first. Caleb saw lights swing wide near the bridge. The lead van had stopped. A man stepped from behind it, lean and dark against the snow. Even at a distance, Silas Trent carried himself like someone who knew every inch of ground beneath his boots and had already chosen 3 ways to use it. He raised one hand. Not greeting. Signal. The utility truck revved. Move, Caleb said. Silas did not shout. He did not need to. The drivers began loading faster. One van lurched toward the wooden bridge. The other backed sharply, trying to cut off the lower trail. Mara grabbed Lillian by the sleeve. Stay with me. I'll slow you down. Then walk faster. Caleb was already moving with Bishop, angling toward the old bridge through a line of pines. He knew the route from his father's maps and from the boyhood memories of being told not to run there because the boards were older than his sense. the bridge crossed a narrow ravine where spring runoff carved the earth deep. In winter it looked harmless, a white seam under shadow. Harmless things were having a poor reputation lately. Mara split left toward her reserve patrol vehicle, hidden near the lower spur. She had placed it there earlier, with Owen's unofficial blessing. Not enough to trigger a county-wide response, but enough to give her wheels if proof became pursuit. Caleb did not like separating, but he did not stop her. That mattered. The first van reached the bridge as Mara's headlights flared from below, blocking the exit road. The driver slammed the brakes. Snow sprayed. The rear van skidded sideways, boxed by its own panic and the narrow track. Silas moved like a man made of old weather. He cut away from the vehicles, carrying a gray document bag, heading for the timber beyond the bridge. "Silas?" Mara's voice cracked through the cold. "Sawtooth County Sheriff's Department. Stop where you are." He did not. Caleb and Bishop emerged near the bridge approach. The planks groaned beneath the van's weight. One rear door had swung open, spilling a silver-lined medical pouch and loose folders across the snow-dusted boards. Wind caught the papers. Bishop lunged. "Bishop, wait!" The dog caught the strap of the fallen pouch in his teeth just as one of the bridge boards shifted beneath him. His front paw punched through the rotten gap between planks. He dropped hard, chest hitting wood, body twisting to keep hold of the pouch. A sound left him. Not loud, not dramatic. A strained, breathless cry that cut Caleb more sharply than any shout. Silas was already running into the trees beyond the bridge. For 1 second, Caleb saw both paths. Silas disappearing with the bag. Bishop trapped on the bridge, paw wedged, body tense with pain but jaws still locked around the evidence pouch. The old part of Caleb rose first. Chase. Close distance. End the threat. Do not let the enemy escape. Then Bishop looked at him. Not afraid. Trusting. That was worse. Caleb's hand tightened around the rope at his shoulder. Mara was already moving after Silas from the lower angle, using her vehicle for cover, voice firm as she called commands into the radio. She did not look back for Caleb. She did not need him to finish her part. Bishop did. Caleb dropped to his knees beside the dog. "I've got you," he said. Bishop released a shaky breath, but did not let go of the pouch. "Stubborn old judge?" Caleb worked the plank loose with the pry bar, slow enough not to splinter the wood into Bishop's leg. The dog trembled once. Caleb felt the tremor travel through his own hands. He kept his voice low, steady, as if speaking to both of them. "Easy, easy. We don't win by losing you." Beyond the bridge, Mara's voice cut through the trees. "Silas Trent, stop!" A crash followed, branches breaking, a grunt, then silence. Caleb freed the board. Bishop's paw came loose. The dog collapsed against him, still holding the pouch. Caleb laughed once, breathless and furious with relief. "You absolute idiot!" Bishop dropped the pouch into his lap, as if presenting a legal argument. From the far trail, Mara emerged with Silas in front of her, hands restrained behind his back with zip ties. Her hair had come loose from its tie, one cheek marked with snow and dirt, but her weapon was steady, and her eyes were bright with hard-won certainty. Silas was no longer smiling. That made him look smaller. "You all have no idea what you're breaking," he said. Mara shoved him forward. "Funny. I was about to say the same." Headlights appeared along the lower road. 1 pair, then 3. Sheriff Owen Bellamy arrived in the first vehicle, tall and broad beneath a brown winter coat, silver mustache stark in the light. He moved with the heavy caution of a man who hated being wrong, but hated corruption more. Behind him came 2 deputies, and moments later, Rowan Kessler in a county SUV, pale-faced and shaking as he stepped out into the snow. Rowan looked younger than 33 in the headlights, thin and tired, his uniform jacket hanging a little loose. He held a flash drive in one hand like it weighed 50 pounds. Mara saw it. He swallowed. The original radio log, before it was edited. Sheriff Owen turned toward him. "Deputy Kessler?" Rowan's eyes flicked toward the road, toward the clinic lights far beyond the trees, toward everything he feared losing. Then he held out the drive. "I should have brought it sooner." Mara took it gently. "You brought it now." Lillian Crow stepped from Caleb's side, face pale, medical bag clutched to her chest. "Owen," she said, voice breaking, "I need to make a statement." The sheriff looked at her for a long moment. Something old and disappointed passed through his face. Then he nodded. "All right, Doctor. Start with the truth and don't decorate it." Caleb sat in the snow beside Bishop, one hand checking the dog's paw. No break, he thought. Sprain, bruising, maybe a cut between the pads. Painful, but not ruined. Bishop leaned into him, tired but proud. Mara walked back across the bridge, carrying the document pouch Bishop had saved. She knelt in front of the dog. "You are impossible," she whispered. Bishop wagged his tail once, accepting the charge. Then Mara looked at Caleb. No grand speech passed between them. No promise. No sudden confession beneath moonlight. Only an understanding, simple and strong as a handhold on ice. He had trusted her to finish the chase. She had trusted him to save what mattered in front of him. Around them, deputies photographed cargo, sealed boxes, recorded statements, and marked tire tracks before the snow could soften them away. The mountain watched in silence. The breathing road lay beneath moonlight, no longer only a path for the lost. Tonight it had carried the truth out of hiding. And for the first time since Mara's car had gone over the ditch at Ravencut, that truth did not belong to one frightened deputy, one grieving rancher, or one loyal dog. It stood in the open, surrounded by witnesses, breathing cold air like something alive. The case did not end with thunder. It ended with paper, boxes of it, statements printed and signed under fluorescent lights, photographs time-stamped and sealed, transport logs matched against insurance claims, radio recordings copied, authenticated, and played in rooms where men who once spoke too loudly began choosing silence with care. Gideon Vale was arrested on a Tuesday morning while leaving a county development breakfast. No chase, no dramatic confession. Just Sheriff Owen Bellamy standing beside two federal agents beneath the awning of the Sawtooth Community Hall, his silver mustache stiff with frost and his face set like a man who had finally stopped arguing with the truth. Gideon wore a charcoal coat, black gloves, and the calm expression of someone still certain the world would remember his donations before his crimes. Even when the cuffs closed around his wrists, he glanced at the gathering crowd, as if expecting them to apologize for witnessing it. Some did look ashamed. Some looked angry. A few looked relieved. That was the first lesson Sawtooth Valley learned after the snow began to melt. A town could be saved and wounded by the same revelation. Evergreen Rural Clinic did not close. That mattered more than any headline. For 2 weeks, rumors moved through town faster than plow trucks. Some said Mara Ellison had destroyed the only medical safety net the valley had. Others said Gideon had been stealing from patients for years. A few insisted both things could be true because small towns had a special talent for holding contradictions the way old barns held dust. The state appointed an independent administrator. Auditors arrived with gray laptops and expressions that made even innocent filing cabinets look nervous. Medication inventory was rebuilt. Patient records were reviewed. Insurance claims were frozen, corrected, or turned over to investigators. Dr. Lillian Crow stepped down before anyone asked her to. She did not hold a press conference. She did not ask for sympathy. She walked into the clinic one morning wearing a plain gray coat, handed over her keys, and sat for questioning with her old stethoscope still in her bag. Her license was suspended pending review. She agreed to testify. When Mara saw her afterward outside the courthouse, Lillian looked smaller without the white coat. Not innocent, not ruined. Human. "I thought if I kept the clinic alive," Lillian said, eyes red from sleeplessness, "the lies would stay smaller than the good." Mara stood with her hands in her coat pockets. "And did they?" Lillian shook her head. No more defense came. Mara did not forgive her there. Forgiveness was not a coin to be thrown into every open hand. But she nodded once, and for Lillian that seemed to be enough to keep walking. At the Blue Lantern, people gathered the way they always had when the weather was bad or the truth was worse. They sat over coffee that went cold. They argued in low voices. They looked toward Mara when she entered, and then looked away too quickly. Nora Pike let that continue for exactly 3 days. On the 4th, she planted both hands on the counter and announced, "If this town was a house, half of you would rather freeze than admit where the draft is coming from." No one spoke. Nora pointed a pencil at the room. "Mara didn't put the hole in the wall. She found it." A plow driver muttered, "Easy to say when you don't need the clinic." Nora turned on him with the terrible majesty of a woman who had once thrown a drunk mayor out by his scarf. "My sister gets her heart medicine there, Frank. I need that clinic plenty. That's why I'd like it run by people who aren't using the supply closet as a magic trick." That ended the argument, not because everyone agreed, because the truth, when spoken plainly enough, can sit down at a table and make cowards move their elbows. Sheriff Owen Bellamy made his own statement 1 week later in the county meeting room. He did not dress it up. He stood beside Mara, Rowan Kessler, and 2 state investigators, his hat in his hands. "I was slow to believe Deputy Ellison," he said. "That was my mistake, not hers." Mara did not smile. She did not need the room to love her. She needed the system to finally carry its share of weight. Rowan stood stiffly beside her, pale but upright. He had admitted delaying the release of the original radio log. He would face discipline. He accepted that with the scared dignity of a man who had stopped running from his own conscience. After the meeting, he approached Mara near the hallway vending machine. "My mother's worried people will blame her," he said. Mara looked at him, surprised by the strange direction guilt could travel. "Tell her they won't hear it from me." Rowan nodded. "Thank you." Then, after a pause, "I should have been braver." Mara leaned against the wall. Brave isn't a thing you either are or aren't. Sometimes it's just the next honest thing done late. Rowan looked at her for a long moment, then gave the smallest laugh. That sounds like something Nora would put on a pie box. She'd charge extra. Life did not become easy after that. That was the second lesson. Justice had teeth, but healing had hands, and hands worked slowly. Caleb could have sold Silver Elk Ranch once the investigation ended. In fact, 2 offers came before spring thaw. One from a developer who wanted private cabins. Another from a retreat company that used words like rustic, healing, and exclusive in ways that made Caleb want to lock the gate and teach Bishop to read contracts. He burned neither offer. That would have been dramatic. He simply set them in the stove and let winter do the rest. By March, he had cleared the old horse barn. The building had survived more winters than most men survived opinions. Its roof sagged a little in the middle. The doors stuck. One corner smelled permanently of hay, cold iron, and stubborn mice. But the beams were sound, and sunlight came through the upper gaps in long gold bars. Emmett Voss came first to help mark the old rescue trails. He arrived wearing his faded yellow plow jacket, carrying a paper map so creased it looked like it had fought in 3 wars and lost none of them. "GPS is for people who trust satellites more than snow," he declared. Caleb handed him coffee. "Good morning to you, too." Morning's a rumor until noon. Together they walked the breathing road, the north draw, and the bridge approach. They marked safe crossings, avalanche-prone slopes, and places where a stranded driver might survive if found before cold turned merciless. Owen connected Caleb with the volunteer search and rescue team. Nora donated coffee, sandwiches, and against Caleb's direct orders, dog biscuits shaped like tiny badges. Mara handled legal permissions, liability forms, and coordination with the county. Bishop healed. The veterinarian said the paw sprain would trouble him for a while. Bishop treated this diagnosis with contempt. He limped dramatically when denied treats and forgot entirely when someone opened the training field gate. By late spring, he moved with only a slight stiffness after long days, his black and gold coat shining beneath the returning sun. Silver Elk changed by inches. A whiteboard appeared inside the barn, listing weather codes and training dates. Old stalls were cleaned and converted into storage for ropes, blankets, stretchers, and canine gear. The hayloft became a place where volunteers drank coffee and argued about radios. Caleb rehung the crooked wooden elk sign his sister had painted, antlers too grand for its confused little face. One afternoon, Mara found him standing beneath it. "You kept it," she said. "Of course. It looks like a horse that joined royalty." That was the official family interpretation. She stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "Your sister would like what you're building." Caleb looked at the sign for a long time. For once, speaking of the dead did not feel like opening a wound. It felt like opening a window. "I hope so." Mara did not say more. That was one of the reasons he trusted her. They did not fall in love like people falling off a cliff. They built toward it like a fence line after winter, one post at a time, checking the ground, learning where the earth held firm. Mara came by after shifts, sometimes in uniform, sometimes in jeans and a sweater, with her hair down around her shoulders. Caleb learned she drank coffee too late and pretended it did not affect her sleep. She learned he kept 3 flashlights in the kitchen drawer and 1 in the bread box, for reasons even he could not fully defend. Bishop pretended indifference and betrayed himself constantly. If Mara sat near the hearth, he dragged the wool blanket closer to her boots. If Caleb and Mara stood too far apart on the porch, Bishop positioned himself between them and leaned until someone moved. Once, during a search and rescue drill, he abandoned a perfectly good scent trail to steal Nora's sandwich, then returned to the trail with the confidence of a hero who had simply made time for nutrition. By autumn, Silver Elk had become the county's winter rescue training point. By the following winter, its porch light was known across the valley. Not as a symbol, people used that word too easily. It was a practical light, a working light, the kind left on because someone might need it. And somewhere in the slow work of shared mornings, bad coffee, repaired gates, legal forms, grief named without fear, and laughter that arrived when no one had planned for it, Caleb and Mara stopped pretending their lives were only intersecting because of the case. One evening, beneath light snowfall, Mara stood beside him at the barn entrance while Bishop slept in the open doorway. "I don't know how to do this quickly," Caleb said. Mara looked out over the field. "Good." He turned to her. She smiled a little. Quickly usually means someone skipped the hard parts. He nodded. "Then we don't skip them." They did not. 1 year after Gideon Vale's arrest, they married in the horse barn. It was a small wedding because neither of them trusted crowds that smiled too much. The barn had been scrubbed, swept, and strung with warm lights along the old beams. Pine garlands hung on stall doors. Snow fell outside in soft silver flakes, visible through the open upper windows. The floor smelled faintly of cedar, hay, and winter wool. Nora made the cake and threatened anyone who used the word rustic in her presence. Emmett arrived in a suit that fit him everywhere except where dignity required breathing. Owen stood near the front, solemn as a man, attending a swearing-in ceremony. Rowan smiled more than he spoke, his mother sitting beside him with a blanket over her knees and pride shining quietly in her eyes. Lillian Crow came too. She sat near the back, not hiding, not seeking attention. When Mara saw her, Lillian lowered her head slightly. Mara returned the gesture. It was not absolution. It was acknowledgement. Sometimes that was the first stone in a bridge. Bishop wore a small leather pouch tied to his collar. Inside were the rings. He understood the assignment with terrifying seriousness. When Nora whispered, "Don't sneeze," he looked offended. Then he walked down the barn aisle. Slow, regal, absurdly proud. The guests held their breath, partly from emotion, partly because Bishop's expression suggested anyone laughing would be found guilty. He reached Caleb and Mara, sat, lifted his head, and sneezed. The leather pouch bounced against his chest like a drunk church bell. The barn erupted. Even Owen laughed. Emmett wheezed so hard Nora hit him on the back. Mara covered her mouth, eyes bright. Caleb laughed too, fully and helplessly, the sound breaking free from some locked room inside him that had been dark for years. Bishop blinked at them all, offended by joy. When the laughter settled, Caleb took the rings from the pouch. He looked at Mara beneath the golden lights. Snow moved softly beyond the barn doors. Silver Elk stood around them, no longer a mausoleum of everything he had lost. The house, the fields, the road, the barn, they had become something else, not healed completely. Healing was not a coat of paint, but alive. Mara held his hands. Her palms were warm. Caleb thought of the road where he had found her. The wrecked patrol car. Her voice begging not to be taken where help had learned to wear a mask. He thought of Bishop trapped on the bridge, of his father's map, his mother's scarf, Nora's napkin, Rowan's shaking hand holding out the truth, Lillian's broken confession, Owen's public apology. All of it had led here. Not because fate was gentle, because people, battered and stubborn and imperfect, had chosen not to leave one another in the snow. Caleb made his vow simply. No grand speech, no polished poetry, just a promise to return, to listen, to stand beside, and to keep the porch light burning. Mara's vow was steadier than her voice. She promised not to mistake solitude for strength, not to turn away from hard truth, and to build a home where duty and tenderness could sit at the same table. Bishop lay down across both their boots before the ceremony ended. No one moved him. That evening, long after the guests had gone and the barn lights glowed soft behind them, Caleb and Mara stood on the porch of Silver Elk Ranch. Bishop slept between them, paws twitching in some dream of open fields and well-earned roast beef. Snow covered the pasture. The porch light burned gold against the dark. Caleb looked at it and understood at last that it was not waiting for the dead to come home. It was burning for the living, for the lost driver, for the frightened witness, for the neighbor too ashamed to knock, for the man who thought he had returned only to grieve and had instead been asked to open the door. Mara slipped her hand into his. Bishop sighed in his sleep, as if approving the arrangement. Across Sawtooth Valley, winter settled gently over roofs, roads, and pine trees. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the breathing road waited beneath the moon, no longer a secret path for hidden wrongs, but a promise kept by those willing to walk it. And at Silver Elk Ranch, beneath the old porch light, home was no longer a place Caleb had inherited from the dead. It was a vow he had chosen among the living. Sometimes the road back home is not the road we expected. Caleb returned to Silver Elk, carrying grief, silence, and old ghosts. But through one wounded deputy, one loyal dog, and one truth that refused to stay buried, he learned that a home is not only where we remember the lost, it is where we choose to protect the living. Maybe that is grace in its quietest form, not a thunderous miracle, but a porch light left on, a hand reaching out, a faithful heart refusing to walk away. If this story touched you, share in the comments what home means to you. And if you'd like to hear more stories of loyalty, courage, and second chances, please consider subscribing. May your own road lead you toward peace, and may there always be a light waiting for you.